of the most frustrating things for parents is getting their children to do what they want. We all feel that we should just be able to say, yeah, do this, do that, but they don't. Children don't do what we ask them to do often. And worse yet, sometimes they do things that we ask them not to do. And it's hard to stop them from doing those things. When a parent wants a child to stop doing something, that's called setting a limit. The parent sets a limit and says, no, stop, don't do that, right? Or sometimes a parent says they want you to do something to the child. So the parent says, yes, you may watch that show on your screen, but first you must do your homework. That's also setting a limit when you're trying to get them to do something. And parents find setting limits to be the hardest thing because children don't necessarily cooperate with them. And the parent doesn't want to be mean, but they need to get the child to do what they want. So researchers have looked at this problem, and they've discovered that there are basically 4 ways that parents deal with it. The first way that's very common is that parents are very strict, and they say, do this now, don't do that. And they might smack their child or they might punish their child, but they try very hard to be strict to make the child do what they want. That's one approach. We call that the authoritarian or strict approach. The problem with that is that the child doesn't necessarily learn to think for themselves. They're doing what you want only because they're a little frightened. And so you keep having to get more and more, you punish more because otherwise they stop listening to you. And for children who are very strong-willed, they will just become rebellious. They will just say, no, you can't make me do it. And even children who are not strong-willed, they may appear to comply with you, but often they are secretly learning to lie to you. So authoritarian parenting, when kids grow up, the research shows, doesn't work all that well. And so those children really don't get help with their emotions. So as I say, they tend to be more angry as they get older. And they also are not very close to their parents. So that's one way to set limits. But there's another way, as you could imagine. It's sort of the opposite of that. So that is permissive parenting, where you don't set any limits. But that's not good either. First of all, those children can be very hard to live with because they're spoiled, they want their way, and they expect that the parent will do whatever they want and will say yes to them. They also don't develop good habits. They don't get their homework done. They don't do what the parent is asking. In fact, they don't learn self-discipline because they're not asked to. The parent is not really asking them to learn self-discipline, to learn self-control. The parent often doesn't want the child to be unhappy. So the parent says, when the child let's say you have a child who gets angry and they throw their toy across the room and they break their toy, right? Well, what would the authoritarian parent do, the strict parent? They would say, you don't deserve nice things. On to the naughty step with you, or smack, right? And by comparison, what would the permissive parent do? When the child gets angry, they're so angry, they throw their toy, the toy breaks. And what does the permissive parent say? This child is so sad their toy broke, they're crying. And the permissive parent says, oh, don't cry, we'll get you another one. And of course, that's not good for the child either. What's that child learning? That child's learning that there are no consequences to their actions. That child's learning that they don't have to control themselves, right? But they're learning something else that might even be worse. They're learning that their emotions are dangerous, that their parent thinks the emotions are dangerous, and that the parent can't handle their emotions and will do anything to stop them from crying. So this is a child who will use that against the parent, but also might internalize that. They might begin to think that their emotions are dangerous and that they shouldn't feel those big emotions. And so they stuff their emotions. And what happens then? Well, emotions that are stuffed don't really stay stuffed. They they start to bubble up to get healed, just like an infection would. An infection in your body would bubble up to get healed. Well, so would those stuffed feelings. And that makes the child anxious. So children who have permissive parenting get much more anxious. Children need clear limits or they become more anxious. They need clear limits so that they become self-disciplined, but they don't need the strict limits. So I said there were 4 ways that parents handle setting limits. One of them is authoritarianism. One is permissiveness. The third is just ignoring the limits and often ignoring the child. And these parents are usually so overwhelmed. They're working 2 jobs, or maybe they have an addiction problem. They just can't cope. And so they're unable to really show up and set limits for their child. And these kids really do the worst. They have the worst prognosis because they they don't feel cared about. They don't feel like they matter to anyone. So they don't learn self-discipline. They don't learn to manage themselves emotionally, and they also don't feel cared about. Often by the time they're teenagers, they are looking for love in all the wrong places. And they are often even self-medicating. These are kids who end up with addiction problems as teenagers. So ignoring your child and not setting limits at all is not the answer. But I said there were 4 possibilities. Now we're on to the 4th one. The fourth possibility for parents is what we would call setting limits, but setting them with empathy. So empathic limits. And that sounds like, well, what does that mean? It just means you set the limits you need to set, but you do it with empathy, which is an understanding of how the child is feeling. You're helping them with their emotions, right? So the child with the toy who got so angry and they hurled their toy across the room and broke it, this parent is not going to go buy another toy, but they're also not going to get angry at the child. This parent will say, oh, you're so sad. You're crying. You broke your toy. You were so mad, right? You took it and you threw it. And then what happened? It broke. That's right. Your toy broke because you threw it. Yeah, I know that makes you so sad. No, sweetheart, we're not going to buy another toy. That was the only toy like that we had. We're not buying another one. It's not in our budget. I know that makes you very sad. And you give the child a hug, right? And they're allowed to have all their feelings about it, but you still don't go buy the new toy. You're not protecting the child from the consequences of their action. You're not protecting your child from feeling uncomfortable, right? You're setting whatever limit you need to. So we set limits all day, every day as parents, right? And what happens if your child won't do what you ask? Well, you can become more authoritarian. You can say, do that now, or I will punish you. Or we've already said that doesn't really work. Or you could become more permissive and say, oh, I don't care. Go watch TV, right? And that doesn't work either, as we've learned, that permissive parenting. What does work is to say to the child, I know it's so hard to sit down and do your homework. I hear you don't want to do it. I know you've been working all day at school and the homework still needs to get done. How can we make this work for you, right? So you insist on the limit, but you give your child support so that they can meet your limit, so they can do what you meet your expectations and do what you're asking. And that's true no matter what limit you're setting. You could be setting the limit with your little one that it's bedtime. You could say, I know it's so hard to stop playing and get ready for bed. And it's bedtime. Come on, let's go. Let's pick out a story to read together, right? And if the child still resists, you might say, I know it's so hard to stop playing. I bet when you grow up, you'll never go to bed, will you? You'll probably play all night every night, won't you? And your child will say, yeah. And you say, I know. Well, when you get big, you can decide to do that if you want when you're a grown up. Right now, it's bedtime. Come on, let's go. And the child learns something really important here. They don't get everything they want, but they get something better. They get a parent who cares about them, understands, and the child's happiness is important to the parent. And that's what children really want. They don't need everything they want. They want that parent. So that's when you set empathic limits, your child is more inclined to cooperate with you because they feel understood. And if we think about our own experience, it's the same way. I might say to my husband, "Oh, I've been working so hard. I want to go on vacation." And if my husband said to me, "We don't have the money for that. We can't go on vacation. You always want to go on vacation." He would make me feel bad about myself, right? Or if my husband said, "Well, we don't have the money for that, but go ahead." That wouldn't be good either, right? If we didn't have the money. But what if my husband said, "You have been working so hard. You have been working so hard. A vacation sounds like a great thing. I wish we had the money for that right now." I wouldn't have to have the vacation. I would feel understood. I might still want the vacation, but I would be willing to at least talk about it, and I wouldn't feel so upset. And that we can all relate to that, right? We just want to feel heard. And that's true for children as well. Here's the way you set limits. It's not not easy. You have to control your own emotions, but it's actually pretty simple. The first thing you do is you say what the limit is. No pushing your brother. Pushing hurts. Stop pushing, right? So some version of that. No, stop pushing, right? That's the first thing. You set the limit. The second thing you do is you acknowledge how the child feels. Like, you want the truck that's behind your brother. Obviously, that's what the child is going for. He wants the brother to move, so he gets the truck. So he's pushing the brother out of the way. You say, "It looks like you want the truck." And then, third thing, you tell the child what they can do. You say to your child, "You want the truck. Say to your brother, 'Move, please. I need the truck.'" So you're teaching them how to get what they want, right, without hurting the brother. So that's true for every limit you set. You set the limit, you acknowledge why the child is doing it, what they need. You can change the order of those two things if you want. And then the third thing you do is you tell them another way to, you redirect so that they can get their need met. So in conclusion, you do need to set limits. Your child does need guidance. You're a parent, but you can do it in a way that strengthens your relationship with your child. And the way you do that is offer your child understanding even while you hold your limit. And you'll see that it makes a big difference. Your relationship with your child will actually get stronger. Even though you're saying no, even though you're being very clear about your limits, the relationship will get stronger because your child will feel heard and understood.